You're listening to Deeper with Dani, a podcast where we dig deep because everything is that serious. Happy Women's Month! We have unlocked a new location, and that is my bedroom because I have family members outside in the living room where I typically record, and I'm not ready for a live audience just yet. And if I were to have a live audience, I wouldn't want it to be mostly my family members. So we're here. It's Women's Month. I figured that I might as well devote March episodes toward discussing topics surrounding women's issues, women's rights that I feel very, very strongly about and are tied to my personal experiences as a woman. I started the conversation in the last episode where I talked about singlehood, which, if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend because it sets the proper foundation for today's topic, and that is being a mother. Even if in that episode I acknowledged that being single isn't really a bad thing, that I don't find it weird to be single at my big age where people are getting married and settling down, all these kinds of things that require a partner, I don't feel incomplete because there are things in my life that allow me to embody roles that give me as much fulfillment as my married counterparts. Like, I don't see it as much of a loss. If anything, not being partnered or not conforming to traditional gender roles has allowed me to expand my worldview and my definition of what it means to be a woman. Despite this security that I feel in myself, I can't help but drive the conversation forward and talk about motherhood. Even if I'm somebody who has decided to be child-free, I know that this is an identity, or this is a decision that is still met with resistance among people in my family, people in my immediate circle, people outside of my immediate circle, society at large, really. Because when a woman says that she doesn't want to have kids, people automatically think that there must be something wrong with her. Why doesn't it come natural to you to want to be a mother? This very essentialist view of womanhood has caused more harm than good in the last few generations. From our grandmothers to our mothers, who it seems that motherhood was thrust upon them, a lot of them have really become comfortable with whatever fate that they ended up with, being mothers of like 3 to 11 children, having to raise kids on their own, being a stay-at-home mother. The older women, the women who came before us, have finally found a narrative that best suits whatever their circumstances are. And while I'm not entirely against that, I can't help but notice now that if the older women in our lives were just educated as much as we are at the moment, I can't help but think of how many of us wouldn't have existed, or how much different their lives would have turned out if they were just made to realize that being a mother is not a requirement, or it's not the essence of being a woman. On TikTok, there is a girl called the Girl with the List. Her name is Abigail Porter, and she is summoned by all of TikTok whenever women, mothers, parents even, post videos about their forms of birth control. Birth control meaning this is one big downside of having a kid, or this is the exact cure that you need for your baby fever. For this episode, I went through her list because I don't know, it was always referenced whenever I'd come across these videos, but I never really saw the full extent or the full contents of that list. You can check out her list, which I'll link down below. Most of these reasons are physical changes in the body. I don't think many people are aware of what exactly a person goes through when they get pregnant and when they start to have kids. So in Abigail Porter's list, she has reasons not to have kids before pregnancy, during pregnancy, after childbirth, and when you start raising a kid, which understandably are good categories to have because it really doesn't start or stop at getting pregnant. Being a mother changes you entirely. I'm not talking about in a transformative way, like in a psychological sense where you kind of feel like you achieve self-actualization when you become a mother, but it talks about how you just don't become the same person anymore once you have your first kid. And it's crazy that there are women who decide or who go through pregnancy more than once. So going through the list was a ride. The list starts off very mildly. She talks about weight gain. You either gain weight or you lose weight, and then you might have your period throughout your pregnancy, which honestly is a nightmare because apart from being protected while on birth control, my birth control has stopped my periods, which has been a relief for me because I never enjoyed menstruating. And then the list progressively gets worse. She talks about extreme physical changes and conditions that you could possibly have, such as losing all of your teeth, growing a third breast on your armpit, being allergic to foods that you used to be able to consume prior to getting pregnant. You could also give birth to a tumor. Like the child that you're carrying could end up transforming into a cancerous tumor. And I had to fact check that because I thought that they were joking. It turns out that that's an actual possibility. It's called gestational trophoblastic disease. It's a real thing. The World Health Organization actually confirms that being pregnant puts you at great risk of dying, death. Like you don't live anymore. Because in 2023, over 700 women died each day from preventable diseases related to pregnancy. A maternal death occurred almost every 2 minutes in 2023. That's crazy. All physical changes aside, the fact that you're at greater risk of dying when you're pregnant should be more than enough to make you reconsider if you have baby fever or if you have the urge to start a family, even if you're not stable yet. The list goes on. Again, progressively worse, but then it talks about the many different social disadvantages that one goes through when they are pregnant. This wasn't Abigail Porter's list, but I also found another girl with a list that was referenced on different subreddits. It talked about how being pregnant or having a kid makes people entitled to touching you, like touching your belly out of nowhere, teasing you for being pregnant. There's a very terrifying, non-consensual medical decision that they make that is called the husband stitch. So apparently after childbirth, it really wrecks your sexual organs, right? And there are women who have reported experiencing the husband stitch, and that is where they undergo a non-consensual medical procedure where doctors stitch them up so that they get tighter down there. And this is primarily for the pleasure of their male partners. What do you mean? What do you mean that's a thing? Also, unpaid maternity leave is a big problem in many other countries. Let me see the maternity leave in the Philippines. Other countries, their maternity leave is unpaid, but here in the Philippines, we have the RA 11210, also known as the Expanded Maternity Leave Law. The 105-day Expanded Maternity Leave Law provides the updated policy on maternity leaves that covers females who are workers in both the private and public sectors, workers in the informal economy, voluntary contributors to the SSS, and national athletes. So it grants a woman the option to allocate up to 7 days of paid maternity leave to her child's father or an alternative caregiver. So this law here in the Philippines has increased our paid maternity leave to up to 105 days in case of live birth, with an option to extend it for 30 more days but without pay. The law also grants an additional 15 days of paid maternity leave for those who qualify as solo parents under RA 8972. In case a woman goes through a miscarriage or emergency termination, which includes stillbirth, paid maternity leave shall be 60 days. Your relationship status is not an issue here. It can be availed of whether you are single, you are married, you're living in with someone. So our law is pretty good. But I'd like to think that 105 days is not enough. I don't think 105 days is enough for you to adjust to this whole new life that you now have, which gives me all the more reason to remain child-free, which we'll talk about later on. And going back with the girl with the list, her list kind of borders toward anti-natalism, or it's just too aggressively child-free to me, which I also take issue with because I find that my feminist views are founded on the belief that all women deserve to exercise their autonomy, to make decisions that they feel are right to them. But I'm also someone who believes that we have to be supporting women enough to ensure that the institutions or the systems that we participate in allow them to make safe and well-informed choices. With that list, it has affirmed some parts of myself, like why I don't want to have kids, because I don't want to go through the very physical changes that come with that. Maybe there are women who want to go through that. If that means having a child that they could love for the rest of their lives, that's fine. But for me, it's never been something that I aspired to have. Even as a kid, like when I used to be asked what I wanted to be when I grow up, like I said previously, I'd never said I wanted to be a mother. I wanted to be a wife. In the drawings that I used to make, I never had drawings of me taking care of kids. If anything, I just drew pictures of myself in my big, big house with pets that I wanted to have. That was pretty much it. Growing up, I don't recall being handed that expectation. All I knew was that the typical life course included going to college, working for a few years, meeting the love of your life, getting married, having kids. It was just that vague. But then as I grew up, as I opened myself up to the world and realized just how complicated life is, I figured that being a mother wasn't something that I truly desired. Like, it did not feel as innate as people say it is. Yes, in my friend group, I was somewhat the mom friend in certain situations, taking care of my friends and just looking out for them, being the voice of reason when everyone else was being immature. But it never reached the point where I found myself thinking that I could do this with an actual child. I could look out for somebody. The closest that I had was when my friends and I would talk about the future. When we were in college, we'd talk about the future, what our lives would be like 10, 20 years down the line. And we'd all talk about how maybe some of us would be married, some of us would have kids. And that was when I started playing with the idea of maybe I do want it. Maybe I do want to have a kid. But it was mainly because I just didn't want to miss out on the conversations that I was having with my friends. And at that time, How I Met Your Mother was a huge hit. Yes, I do prefer that over Friends. In the story of Ted Mosby, in his pursuit of finding the love of his life and the mother of his children, it's also had me thinking, do I want to be telling this exact story as well 15 to 20 years from now? And I realized, no. However it ended, that show, while I have very vague memories of how it ended, it's not something that I actively wanted, or it didn't change my worldview that much. The closest that I had was just thinking to myself, if I ever had a kid, that kid would be lucky because I'd be such a cool mom. But then what shattered this belief was realizing that the reason why I thought I would make such a great mom was because I saw motherhood as a chance to heal parts of my childhood. I saw the possibility of having a kid to be a chance to create a childhood that was safe enough for me and was enough to compensate for the shortcomings that my parents had when I was a kid. Thanks to my psychotherapy classes, which allowed me to further reflect on that, I figured I don't think that's a good enough reason to want to be a mom. I know that there are women out there who want to be mothers for this very reason, because they want to give their kids the kind of childhood that they never got to experience. But you can't really tell what your kid is going to be like. You can't really guarantee 100% that whatever it is that you missed out on as a kid is what your future child would want from you. Honestly, I'm too selfish to even consider a difference in opinion. And it's kind of like that comic. The parents are like, oh, we'll never pass down our trauma to our kid. We're definitely not going to be making the same mistakes that our parents did. And then the caption that the child has is like, oh, this is a new type of trauma. That's really cemented my decision not to have kids. I'm not ready for the amount of commitment required to raise a child, because just raising myself alone has been difficult. It's been rewarding, yes. Healing my inner child has been a challenge, yes. But adding another person into the mix, I find that to be an even bigger challenge, with expectations that I'm not even sure I could live up to. And that's okay, because I'd rather regret not having kids down the line than to have kids and end up feeling terrible because I actually don't want that. I don't want to inflict that kind of pain on innocent people who never really asked to be born. But these are personal reasons. These are reasons that require actions that I can take myself. But let's say I was capable. Let's say I had the skill, I had the drive, I had the proper motivation to be a mother. Would I still want to be one? No, because there's a huge lack of structural support that ensures the success of motherhood here in the Philippines. As we all know, comprehensive sexual education is still considered taboo. And because many schools, both in the basic ed and in the higher education department, are run by Catholic institutions or religious institutions, it's difficult to be educating children on what responsible decisions they have to be making for their reproductive health. And this bleeds into our healthcare system as well. We have very ignorant people incapable of making smart decisions about their sexual health. And then in the healthcare system, we barely have enough resources that protect women who get pregnant, who encounter complications during pregnancy, women who just aren't supported as much as other diseases that aren't gendered to begin with. That strengthens my hesitation to become a mother. I already can't guarantee myself a good partner in the long run. It's already something that I am okay not to have. Motherhood is also something that I'm willing to let go of because I find that motherhood requires a proper partnership for you to be set up for success. This isn't a jab at single mothers, at households with mothers who have such a different family structure than the typical mother-father dynamic. I'm just saying that being a mother requires having someone by your side, whether it is your actual partner, whether it is a family member, or just someone really reliable that could get you through the hardest parts, not only of childbirth, but of raising that kid. It requires a village, even, not just your immediate family. It requires a proper community that looks out not just for the mother, but also for the child and the safety of both. While I am confident in the support that I receive from my social circles, I don't think that I myself am ready to raise a kid in this economy, in this climate. And I don't think I'm ready to ask for that much help from my village in raising a kid. Because again, it requires having a partner that you could have a kid with. And I understand that this isn't always the circumstance that leads to motherhood. I know that there are women who end up raising kids because they got pregnant too early, they were survivors of abuse, violence. There's so much. There are so many other situations that lead to motherhood. I would rather just not take the risk, or I'd just rather not raise a kid, not have a kid, because I am not ready. And I would rather not go through the hardship that is required of motherhood. And despite being child free, being less taboo these days, you see more young adults want to have a child free lifestyle where they just end up being fur parents, they end up taking care of their pets, they end up enacting different roles that allow them to feel fulfillment and purpose in their lives. Motherhood still remains to be a gendered expectation. There have been a lot of surveys conducted and studies conducted about how among Gen Zs, it is men who want to have kids more than women. And I find that this is because women are now more educated about the realities of being a mother. Motherhood isn't just about having a cute baby that you could post to Instagram for people to look at. It's not just about that. It's about maintaining a household. It's about making sure that your kid has all that they need. It's making sure that you're financially capable enough to be giving them the kind of life that they deserve, while also taking care of yourself, because being a good parent also requires taking care of yourself enough so that you don't end up resenting your kid because you gave them all your energy and all your focus. It's still frustrating to see how, even if we've kind of moved forward in the conversation about fertility, about motherhood, about family, there are people who still insist that it is a natural thing. It's a natural desire to have. If it were natural, does that mean I'm abnormal? Does that mean there's something wrong with me? The fact that I don't want to have kids, the fact that I've never felt that calling, I've never ever had to think of what to name my future kid. I don't think it makes me abnormal in a sense that there's something wrong with me. I guess it just makes me different. That maybe I just want a life where I don't have to worry about another life other than my own. I don't want to be up all night changing a kid's diapers because they couldn't stop crying. I don't see the appeal of having to deal with a kid's tantrums. Yes, there are joys to motherhood, to parenting that I am sure if any of you watching are parents, I'm sure you're here watching me saying that I'll never understand the absolute joy that comes with successfully raising a kid. And I get that. I can live without that because there are things in my life that bring me joy that I know other people wouldn't understand because they're not me. And I'm totally okay with that. I'd also like to point out that despite motherhood being the greater expectation among women, I find that there's a paradox in the PR that motherhood gets because while it is expected of you, even if you end up being a mother, society still has their idea of a perfect mother. If you have a kid too early, you're a whore. If you have a kid too late, you're desperate. If you have a kid as a single woman, there's something probably wrong with you. If you have a kid and they end up disabled, you probably did something wrong. It's like we never win. So even if you end up being a mother, society still has these unrealistic expectations of what it means to be a good mother. And it frustrates me that the alpha male atmosphere on the internet has also bled into female spaces because tradwife propaganda is alive and well. And it's frustrating to me because then it gives this unrealistic narrative that motherhood looks a certain way where you're supposed to obey your husband, you're supposed to be submissive, you're supposed to stay at home and only look after the kids. I don't know, like I can't wrap my head around being that submissive or being that quiet. I feel like these expectations that the alt-right side of the internet continues to promote, it's too rotten for my brain to actually absorb. It just strays me away from the whole concept of motherhood, even if I know that that's not what motherhood looks like for everyone. As I was saying, even if you end up being a mother, society will always find ways to be unhappy about the kind of motherhood that one goes through. And I would rather deal with the prejudice and the discrimination that comes with being single than being a mother. I can put up with people's sentiments about being single than being a mother. Put it simply, it just isn't for me. And I could have ended this episode by saying that I want to be child free just because I don't feel like it. But I felt the need to explain it because maybe you're somebody who has been weighing your decisions. You're somebody who has been thinking about whether you want to have kids or not. You're somebody who's also like me, is single, but is also open to being in a relationship, but you're not entirely sure if, you want to have kids down the line. It is my hope that through this episode, women are able to make more well-informed decisions because there are other women telling them what the risks are or what the advantages are that come with a particular choice. I think that's the kind of feminism that I subscribe to, allowing women to make whatever choices that they're comfortable with without feeling like they have to do it. I guess to wrap it all up, my last point here is that I want a child-free life, not a child-free future. And that means on a personal level, I don't want to have kids. It doesn't mean I don't want a future where kids don't exist. As someone working in education, someone who has found purpose in education, I find it to be very fulfilling to help shape young minds. It's the closest that I have to being a mother. Being able to borrow your kids for maybe 4 to 8 hours a day, and then I return them once I clock out. That's the happiest I'll ever be around kids. Again, even if I decide to be child free, even if I don't see myself having kids, I'm not so child free that I want everybody else to be child free. I've decided that I want to be the cool tita that my friends' kids would want to turn to when they can't talk to their parents. And that kind of future requires friends and individuals who want to have kids. I'm somebody who, despite the unconventional choices that I've made with my own life, I still support women who maybe want to conform to traditional gender roles if they want to. I think that even if, yes, we're living in a dying world where the political climate is not as good, I think that we should let hope keep us alive. I have my reasons to keep going despite all the bad that is happening in the world. And I know that there are other people whose reasons for living is their dreams of becoming parents. And who am I to take that choice away from them? As a woman who is no stranger to having her choices questioned, as someone whose choices have been restricted, someone who is used to not being given as much freedom in her decision making, I don't want to impose that on other people who want to have kids. Even if I'm child free, I respect those who want to have kids and are smart about it. I guess at the end of the day, whatever debates that child free people have against people who want to have kids, I think that the disagreement lies in the very fact that there are people who choose to have kids even if they're not capable for it. But in reality, the bigger problem at hand is, again, the healthcare system that we have that still doesn't take women's health as seriously as other health conditions. And we don't live in a society yet where we have enough policies that protect women and protect individuals and allow them to engage in healthy decision making, not only for themselves, but for the families that they'd like to build. So that's why I'm not entirely against kids. I also find it quite strange when people feel like them being child free is an excuse to be an asshole to kids, because that's an entirely different story. Yeah, I guess that concludes today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please give us a 5-star rating on Spotify if you're listening from there. If you're on other platforms on YouTube, comment down below. I'd love to know what your views are as a woman and parenting. Is it something that you would like to be one day? Would you like to give birth to a child? Would you like to adopt one? Or are you like me who would rather just find other roles that mimic parenting? I don't know. It's I always love to hear from people whose opinions are different from mine, because that's how I get to expand my understanding of the world and even increase the empathy that I have, which is needed now more than ever. All my socials are down below if you'd like to stay connected, and I'll catch you next Saturday. Yeah, I'm thinking of moving the schedules to either Saturday or Sunday, but you're getting episodes twice a month. Yeah, that's the best commitment that I could possibly make. And share this on Instagram stories. Tag me as well at not just Dani or at deeper with Dani. Either works. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you all soon. where